The Teshin Corridor was a stretch of space between two great nebulae, and today it became the largest battlefield in galactic history. Admiral Lucia Chun stood on the bridge of the Concorde flagship, unconquered, and watched the enemy fleet emerge from hyperspace like a swarm of metal locusts. There were thousands of hegemony warships stretching across the void, more firepower in one place than anyone had ever assembled before. The Concorde fleet was outnumbered 10-1. All ships report ready, Admiral, her executive officer announced, and Chun could hear the fear in his voice. He was Sorani, one of Ambassador Velkith's people, and his kind had not fought a real war in 800 years. Good, Chun replied calmly. Open a channel to the fleet. She took a deep breath and spoke words that would be remembered for as long as civilization existed. All Concorde vessels. This is Admiral Chun. You know why we are here. You know what we face. The hegemony believes they have already won because they outnumber us and outgun us. They expect us to do what every fleet in history has done when faced with impossible odds. They expect us to break. She paused and let her words sink in. But they have made a critical error. They have forgotten that this fleet contains human vessels. And we do not break. We do not surrender. We do not know when to quit. Today, we show them what that means. Today, we teach them what happens when you push the universe too far. Today, we fight not just for the Concorde, but for every species that has ever been told their limits were permanent. She raised her hand and pointed toward the enemy fleet. All ships attack. The battle began with fire and thunder. Energy beams and missiles crisscrossed the darkness as the two fleets collided in a storm of destruction. Ships exploded into brief flowers of flame before being swallowed by the eternal night. The hegemony commander, Archon Velix himself, watched from his command vessel and waited for the Concorde fleet to break. His tactical displays showed the defenders taking catastrophic losses. Any moment now, the alien crews would hit their biological limits and begin surrendering or collapsing. But the human vessels kept coming. Chun had not deployed her ships in defensive formations. Instead, she had ordered continuous attack runs directly into the heart of the enemy fleet. It was suicide by any conventional measure. But conventional measures assumed an enemy that would eventually stop. The human cruiser Defiant took 17 direct hits and kept firing until its reactor finally gave out. The destroyer never again rammed the hegemony battleship and detonated its entire weapons magazine at point-blank range. The carrier Last Hope launched every fighter it had and then flew straight into an enemy formation, guns blazing until the very end, and the hegemony troops began to break. They had never faced anything like this. Their own kill switches started activating across the fleet as the psychological pressure became too much. Soldiers collapsed at their stations, unable to process an enemy that treated certain death as just another obstacle to overcome. Impossible, Velix hissed, watching his perfect battle plan fall apart. They should have surrendered. The mathematics are clear. They cannot win, but Chun was not fighting to win. She was fighting to inspire. Deep in the hegemony research facility, Dr. Yuki Tanaka made her move. The chaos of battle had pulled most of her guards away, and she used the distraction to break into the main communications array. Her fingers flew across the alien controls as she broadcast her research to the entire Concorde fleet. This is Dr. Yuki Tanaka, she said into the microphone. Hoping someone was listening, I have discovered something critical. The kill switch is not permanent. It can be overridden. Not surgically, not chemically, but through choice. Through will. Through believing that the limit is not real. She uploaded her data, showing how the neural pathways could be redirected through intense focus and determination. Watch the humans. She continued. Learn from them. They are not different because of biology alone. They are different because they refuse to accept that anything is impossible. You can do the same. You can choose to push past your limits. You just have to believe. Across the battlefield, Concord soldiers heard her words of HFY warrior named Threll. The same one who had faced that human medic on Arden 4 years ago felt something stir inside him. He'd watched a human boarding party cut through a hegemony vessel's corridors and suddenly understood what he had witnessed in that ruined hospital. It was not madness. It was freedom. He had spent his whole life accepting that his kill switch defined what he could endure. Now, watching humans charge into certain death with fire in their eyes, he realized the truth. The switch only worked because he believed in it, made a choice. Warriors of the HFY. He roared over the comm channel. Follow me. Today we fight like humans. He charged into battle, and for the first time in his life, his kill switch did not stop him. It was like a fever spreading through the fleet. Species after species, inspired by human courage and Dr. Tanaka's revelation, began to push past their biological limits. Not all of them could do it, not even most, but enough to turn the tide. The hegemony fleet, facing an enemy that suddenly refused to break, began to crumble. Felix watched in horror as his invincible armada came apart around him. He had built his entire strategy on the assumption that the Concorde would eventually stop fighting. They did not stop when Chun's boarding parties breached his flagship. Felix tried to flee. He made it 3 steps before a human soldier tackled him to the ground. The soldier was wounded, bleeding from a dozen cuts, and should have been unconscious hours ago. How? Felix demanded, unable to understand. How do you keep fighting? The soldier smiled despite the pain, because surrender was never an option. The battle ended with the complete destruction of the hegemony fleet. Felix was captured and would eventually stand trial for his crimes. Dr. Tanaka was rescued by a strike team and became the most celebrated scientist in galactic history, but the real victory was something that could not be measured in ships destroyed or territory gained. The galaxy had changed in the months that followed. More and more individuals from across the Concorde learned to push past their kill switches. It was not easy, and many failed, but the knowledge that it was possible changed everything. The limit that had defined intelligent life for millions of years was revealed to be a choice. Not a prison. Ambassador Velketh wrote the official history of what became known as the Liberation. He spent years interviewing survivors and piecing together what had happened. We thought the kill switch protected us from ourselves. He wrote in his final chapter, we were wrong. It protected us from becoming more. The humans showed us what we gave up in exchange for safety. Now we must decide if we have the courage to take it back. Admiral Chun retired from military service and became the first human ambassador to the reformed Galactic Concorde. At her farewell ceremony, she was asked what humans would do now that they were no longer alone in their so-called defect. She smiled the same smile she had worn on the walls of Arden 4. Bloody and unbowed. Same thing we have always done. She said, keep fighting. Keep hoping. Keep proving the impossible wrong. That is what humans do. That is what all of us can do if we choose to. The universe is vast and full of challenges that seem insurmountable. But nothing is truly impossible for those who refuse to give up. She looked out at the gathered representatives of 4,000 species, all of them forever changed by what humanity had shown them. The stars are waiting, she said. Let us see how far we can go when nothing holds us back. The crowd erupted in cheers that echoed across the galaxy. The age of limits was over, the age of hope had begun. The laboratory was cold and dark, buried deep beneath the surface of a world that had no name on any Concorde map. This was hegemony territory, the domain of the Kreth. And no outsider had ever seen these halls and lived to tell about it. Dr. Yuki. Tanaka woke up in a cell made of black metal and immediately knew she was in serious trouble. The Last thing she remembered was walking to her office at the Xenoneurology Institute on Mars. There had been a flash of light, a strange smell, and then nothing. Now she was here, wherever here was, with a pounding headache and a terrible feeling in her stomach. A door slid open, and a creature walked in that made her breath catch in her throat. The Creth were ancient, older than most species in the galaxy. They looked like someone had crossed a spider with a machine, all sharp angles and gleaming metal plates that might have been armor or might have been part of their actual bodies. Their eyes were clusters of red lights that seemed to see everything at once. "Dr. Tanaka," the Creth said in a voice like grinding gears, "we are pleased you have awakened. We have much to discuss." "Who are you?" Yuki demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. "Where am I? What do you want with me?" "My name is Archon Velix, and you are in a research facility of the Creth hegemony." "As for what we want," the creature made a sound that might have been laughter. "We want your expertise. You are the galaxy's foremost expert on human stress responses and pain tolerance. You have spent your career studying why humans can push past limits that stop every other species." Yuki felt ice form in her veins. She had always known her research was sensitive, but she had never imagined it would be valuable enough to kidnap her over. "I will not help you," she said firmly. "We shall see," Velix replied, and gestured for her to follow. They walked through corridors filled with horrors that Yuki tried not to look at. She saw cells containing prisoners from a dozen Concord species, all of them hooked up to machines that blinked and hummed with terrible purpose. She heard screams and whimpers and sounds that no living creature should ever make. "We have been trying to remove the kill switch from other species," Velix explained as they walked. "If we could create soldiers without biological limits, we would be unstoppable. The Concord would fall within a generation." They entered a vast laboratory where Creth scientists worked on operating tables surrounded by floating displays. Yuki saw a Vrethkai warrior strapped down and unconscious. His skull opened to reveal the brain beneath. "It does not work," Velix continued, and there was frustration in his mechanical voice. "The kill switch is not a single organ that can be removed. It is woven throughout the nervous system from birth. We have tried surgery, genetic modification, chemical treatments. Nothing succeeds. Every subject either dies or remains unchanged." He turned to face Yuki directly. "But you humans were born without the switch. You are living proof that intelligent life can exist without it. Your research may hold the key to understanding how this is possible. Help us unlock this secret, and you will be treated as an honored guest." "Refuse." And he gestured toward the operating tables. "We will simply take what we need from your brain directly." Yuki's mind raced as she tried to find a way out of this nightmare. She could not help them create an army without limits. She could not give them the power to conquer the galaxy. But she also could not let them kill her. She needed time. "The research is complex," she said slowly. "I cannot simply explain it. I would need access to my notes, to proper equipment. And even then, it would take months to replicate." Velix studied her with those terrible red eyes. "We are patient," he said finally. "You will have everything you need. But know this, Dr. Tanaka, if we suspect you are deceiving us, there are fates far worse than death." While Yuki began her desperate game of deception and delay, events were unfolding across the galaxy that would soon change everything on the human colony of New Geneva. Governor Marcus Webb met secretly with representatives of the Creth hegemony. Webb was a bitter man who believed humanity deserved better than second-class membership in the Concord. He resented the alien oversight, the restrictions on human expansion, the condescending way other species looked at his people. "You offer us sovereignty," he said to the Creth ambassador. "Freedom from Concord interference. But what do you want in return?" "Military consultation," the ambassador replied smoothly. "Nothing more." We simply wish to learn from your unique perspective on warfare. Your people have much to teach us. Webb knew this was a lie. He knew the hegemony wanted to use humans as weapons. But he told himself it was a fair trade. Let the Kreth point humanity at their enemies, and in return, humans would finally get the respect and independence they deserved. He was not the only colonial governor thinking such thoughts. Across the frontier, human separatists were having similar conversations, making similar deals, telling themselves similar lies. Ambassador Velkith learned of the conspiracy through channels he preferred not to discuss. He had spent months after Arden IV trying to build bridges between humans and the rest of the Concord. And now he saw all that work crumbling to dust. They are playing with fire, he told Admiral Lucia Chun, promoted after heroics on Arden IV, in a secure communication. The hegemony does not want allies. They want weapons. And once they have what they need, they will discard the separatists like broken tools. Can you prove this? Chun asked. Not yet, Velkith admitted, but I am working on it. In the meantime, we must be ready for... An alarm cut him off. Red lights began flashing throughout the station. What is happening? Chun demanded. Velf's face went pale, quite an achievement for a being with naturally blue skin. The hegemony, he breathed. They are not waiting for the separatists. They are attacking now. 3 Concord border worlds simultaneously. Chun felt her heart freeze as she accessed the tactical data. The hegemony fleet was massive, larger than anything the Concord had faced in 1,000 years. And the border worlds they were attacking, there are human garrison troops on all 3 worlds. She said. Yes, Velkith replied grimly. I believe that is precisely the point. In her cell deep beneath the nameless hegemony world, Dara Yuki Tanaka heard alarms begin to wail and knew that her time for deception had run out. Whatever happened next would be decided not by her research, but by fire and blood and the unbreakable will of her species. She looked at the data she had been pretending to analyze and made a decision. The hegemony wanted to understand why humans had no kill switch. They wanted to replicate it, to create soldiers who could not be stopped. But they had missed something crucial in all their research. The kill switch was not just a limiter. It was a prison. Every Concord species had the potential to do what humans did. The switch simply suppressed it, kept it locked away where it could not be accessed. And Yuki had discovered something the hegemony did not know. The lock could be opened. She began encoding her findings into a hidden file, praying she would find a way to get it to the Concord before the hegemony realized what she had done. Galaxy was about to go to war, and humanity would be at the center of it all. The Grand Forum on Axiom Prime was the largest meeting hall ever built by intelligent hands. It could hold representatives from all 4,000 species of the Galactic Concord, and its dome ceiling was painted with stars to remind everyone who gathered there of the vastness they were trying to govern together. Today, every seat was filled, and the topic on everyone's mind was Humanity Ambassador. Chen Wei stood at the speaker's platform in the center of the hall and felt the weight of 4,000 pairs of eyes. Some species had many more pressing down on him. He was a diplomat, trained to stay calm under pressure. But nothing in his training had prepared him for this moment. The debate had been raging for 6 hours, and most of it had been spent calling his species monsters. The humans are clearly defective, the Korath representative had argued in his grinding stone voice. They lack a fundamental biological safeguard that every other intelligent species possesses. They are broken machines, and broken machines are dangerous. Dangerous is too weak a word, the Deshan ambassador had added, her voice bubbling through the water tank that allowed her to breathe on this dry world. They are an existential threat to galactic stability. Every war in our history has ended because one side or both reached their biological limits. What happens when one side has no limits? The answer is extinction. Species after species had taken the floor to condemn humanity. Some wanted the humans quarantined on their homeworld forever. Others suggested more extreme measures that made Chen Wei feel sick to his stomach. A few brave voices had spoken in humanity's defense, but they were overwhelmed by the tide of Inferno. It was his turn to speak, and he had no idea what to say that could change so many minds. He thought about Arden 4 and the soldiers who had died there. He thought about Commander Shan, no relation, but he felt connected to her somehow standing on those broken walls. He thought about all the humans throughout history who had faced impossible odds and refused to give up, and he realized that he did not need to defend his species. He needed to explain them, distinguished representatives of the Galactic Concord. He began, his voice steady and clear. I have listened to your concerns, and I understand them. From your perspective, we must seem like something out of a nightmare. Creatures who cannot be stopped, who will not surrender, who keep fighting long after biology says we should have collapsed. He paused and looked around the vast hall, meeting as many eyes as he could. But I ask you to consider something. You call our lack of a kill switch a defect, a flaw in our design. We call it something else entirely. We call it hope. Murmurs rippled through the assembly, but Chen Wei continued before anyone could interrupt. Let me tell you some stories from our history. Long ago, when we were still fighting with swords and spears, a small force of 300 warriors faced an army of over 100,000. They knew they would die. Their biology, if we had a kill switch, should have made them run or surrender. Instead, they held a narrow pass for 3 days and gave their people time to prepare a defense that ultimately saved their civilization. Brave fools. Someone called out, but Chen Wei smiled. Perhaps. But those brave fools are remembered 3,000 years later as heroes who showed what humans are capable of. They inspired generations who came after them to believe that the impossible was possible. He gestured toward the star-painted ceiling. When we first tried to reach space, we had a disaster. 3 of our astronauts were stranded in a tiny ship more than 200,000 miles from Earth. Their oxygen was running out, their power was failing, and every calculation said they would die. Their biology should have shut them down from the stress and fear. Instead, they worked with teams on Earth to solve problem after problem that no one had ever faced before. They jury-rigged systems that were never designed to work together. They survived on almost no sleep and dwindling resources. And against all odds, they made it home alive. Chen Wei's voice grew stronger as he continued. You see our lack of a kill switch as a threat, but consider what it has given us. Because we do not have a biological limit that tells us when to give up. We never know when something is truly impossible. We attempt things that logic says cannot be done, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes we succeed. We cure diseases that killed millions, because our scientists refused to accept that there was no solution. We built machines that let us fly because dreamers refused to accept that humans could not leave the ground. We reached for the stars because explorers refused to accept that the sky was the limit. He spread his hands wide, addressing the entire assembly. Yes, we are dangerous. I will not pretend otherwise. Our history is full of violence and war, of terrible things we have done to each other. But it is also full of courage and sacrifice, of people who gave their lives so that others might live, of heroes who stood against darkness when everyone else had fallen. The kill switch tells you when to stop. It protects you from pushing too far, from suffering too much, from hoping for things that biology says you cannot have. But it also puts a ceiling on what you can achieve. It draws a line and says this far, no further. We have no such line. We do not know where our limits are because we have never found them. Every time we think we have reached the end of what humans can endure, someone pushes further and shows us that we were wrong. Chen Wei paused. And when he spoke again, His voice was softer, but no less powerful. "You can quarantine us. You can exile us to our homeworld and pretend we do not exist. But I promise you that will not make you safer. Because somewhere out in this vast galaxy, there is a threat that will push you to your limits and beyond. There is a darkness coming that will not stop when you surrender. That will not spare you when your biology shuts you down. When that day comes, you will have a choice. You can face it alone with your limits intact. Or you can face it beside a species that does not know when to quit." He looked directly at Ambassador Velketh, who had been watching in silence throughout the debate. "We are not broken. We are simply different. And different is not always bad. Sometimes it is exactly what the universe needs." Chen Wei stepped back from the platform. His speech finished and the grand forum erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted at each other in 100 languages, some demanding human quarantine and others calling for a new vote, but Ambassador Velketh did not join the chaos. He sat in his seat and thought about what he had seen on Arden 4, about Commander Chun standing bloody and unbowed on those ruined walls. The humans were dangerous. That was undeniable, but perhaps, just perhaps, they were also the galaxy's best hope when the vote finally came. The motion to quarantine humanity failed by the narrowest of margins. It was not a victory, not really. There would be more debates and more fear and more challenges ahead, but for now, humanity remained part of the Galactic Concord and in the shadows of the Grand Forum. Representatives of the Kreth hegemony, the Concords, oldest and most dangerous enemy, exchanged glances and began making plans. They had found exactly what they were looking for: a weapon. Without limits now, they just had to figure out how to aim it. Commander Lucia Chun had never expected to die on a farming colony at the edge of known space. She had joined the military to see the stars, to explore new worlds, and to protect the people who were brave enough to leave Earth behind and build new lives among the cosmos now. She stood on the walls of Colony 7 and watched 3,000 alien warriors march toward her position. And she knew that every tactical calculation said she should surrender. She had 200 soldiers under her command. Most of them were young, fresh out of training, sent to this quiet world because nothing ever happened here. They had signed up for guard duty and supply runs, not for war against one of the most feared warrior species in the galaxy. The Vrethkai were nightmares made flesh. 8 feet tall with 4 arms and skin like black armor. They moved across the open ground with the confidence of predators who had never known defeat. Their eyes glowed red in the dim light of the alien sun, and their weapons hummed with energy that could cut through steel like paper. "Commander," Lieutenant Torres said from beside her, and his voice was steady, even though his hands shook slightly as he gripped his rifle. "What are your orders?" Chum looked at her soldiers. She saw fear in their eyes, but she also saw something else, something that burned beneath the fear like a fire that refused to die. They were scared, but they were not broken. "We hold the line," she said simply. The Vrethkai commander was named Krovith, and he had conquered 11 worlds for his people. He stood at the head of his army and studied the human fortifications with mild curiosity. The walls were thick and the weapons were adequate, but none of that mattered when facing his warriors. Every species in the galaxy possessed a kill switch. It was basic biology, unchangeable and absolute. When his troops attacked, the humans would feel overwhelming fear and pain, and their nervous systems would force them to surrender or collapse. It had happened countless times before on countless worlds. Give them one chance. He ordered his communications officer, "Tell them to surrender now and they will be treated fairly. Tell them resistance is pointless." The message was sent, and the reply came back within minutes. "We appreciate your offer," Commander Chun's voice said over the comm channel, "but we must respectfully decline. These people came here to build homes and raise families. They trusted us to protect them. We will not abandon that trust." Croweth felt something like amusement. The humans were brave, but bravery meant nothing against biology. They would learn soon enough. Attack, he commanded. The first wave of HFY warriors surged forward with weapons blazing, and the humans responded with everything they had. Plasma bolts and bullets filled the air between them, creating a storm of death that lit up the twilight sky. Croweth watched from his command post and waited for the familiar signs of enemy collapse. Within minutes, the defenders should start falling unconscious as their kill switches activated. Within an hour, the survivors should be begging for mercy. The minutes passed, and no one fell. The humans took hits that would have dropped any other species. He watched one soldier get shot through the shoulder and keep firing with her other arm. He watched another get thrown from the wall by an explosion and climb back up to rejoin the fight. He watched them bleed and scream and suffer, and not one of them stopped fighting. Impossible. Croweth whispered. The battle raged through the night and into the next day. The HFY pushed forward again and again, expecting each assault to be the one that finally broke the defenders. Each time, they were thrown back by humans who refused to accept defeat. In the third day, Croweth sent his elite guard, the best warriors his species had produced in a generation. They breached the main gate and poured into the colony streets, certain that close combat would trigger the human kill switches. What followed was a nightmare that none of them would ever forget. The day humans fought in the streets and in the buildings and on the rooftops. They fought with guns and knives and bare hands. When they ran out of ammunition, they used rocks and broken glass and anything else they could find. When they were too wounded to stand, they crawled forward and kept fighting. A HFY sergeant named Thrall found himself facing a human medic in a ruined hospital. The woman had 3 bullets in her chest and blood pouring from a wound on her head, and she was dragging 2 injured soldiers toward the back exit. "Surrender," Thrall commanded, pointing his weapon at her. "You are defeated. Your body should have shut down long ago. Why do you keep fighting?" The medic looked at him with eyes that burned with something he did not understand. "Because they need me," she said simply. Then she pulled out a grenade, and Thrall barely escaped the explosion that killed her, and allowed the 2 soldiers to be rescued by their comrades. By the 5th day, something strange began to happen among the HFY forces. Warriors started collapsing not from wounds, but from pure psychological overload. Their kill switches activated because their minds could not process what they were experiencing. They had evolved to be predators, to be the ones who caused fear in others. They had never developed the ability to feel true terror themselves. Now, facing an enemy that simply would not stop no matter what they did to them, their own biology turned against them. Croweth watched his army crumble and felt something he had never felt in all his years of conquest. Out on the 7th day, he ordered the retreat. His forces fled back to their ships and lifted off from Arden 4, leaving behind hundreds of their dead and the shattered remains of their pride. The humans had not just beaten them. They had broken something fundamental in the HFY. Understanding of the universe. Ambassador Velketh arrived shortly after the battle ended. He walked through the ruined streets of Colony 7 and saw things that defied everything he knew about intelligent life. He saw humans with wounds that should have killed them sitting up and asking about their friends. He saw soldiers who had not slept in a week refusing to rest until every civilian was accounted for. He saw Commander Chun standing on the broken walls with blood on her face and fire in her eyes. "How did you do it?" he asked her. "How did you fight through pain and fear that would have stopped any other species in the galaxy?" Chum looked at him for a long moment before answering. "We did not fight through it," she said. "We fought with it. Fear tells us what we might lose. Pain tells us what we are willing to suffer. They are not weaknesses to be shut down. They are reminders of what matters." She turned to look at her soldiers, the exhausted and wounded survivors who had done the impossible. "We are not broken because we lack a kill switch. she said quietly. We are complete because we can choose when to stop. And today, we chose not to. Velkith watched her walk away to tend to her people. And he understood something terrible and wonderful at the same time. The galaxy would never be the same. The humans had arrived. And they had brought something with them that no one had seen before. The ability to face certain death and say no. Not today. Not ever. Not while we still draw breath. It was terrifying. It was beautiful. And it was only the beginning. Ambassador Velkith stood before the massive observation window and watched the blue planet spin slowly in the darkness of space. Earth looked peaceful from here, covered in swirling white clouds and deep blue oceans that reminded him of his own homeworld. The Sorani diplomat had served the Galactic Concord for over 200 years, and he had seen many species join their great alliance. Some were brilliant scientists, others were skilled traders, and a few were talented artists who created beauty that moved even the coldest hearts across the galaxy. Humans seemed unremarkable to him at first glance. They were soft creatures with no natural armor or weapons. They could not see in the dark like the Vrethkai, could not breathe underwater like the Teshans, and could not survive in the vacuum of space like the silicon-based Korath. By every measure, the Concord used to evaluate new species. Humans ranked somewhere in the middle of the scale, another minor addition to our great family, Velkith said to his assistant. A young Sorani named Thezin, who served as the station's chief xenobiologist, Thenis, did not respond immediately. Instead, she kept her 4 eyes fixed on the holographic display in front of her, where streams of data flowed like rivers of light. Her long fingers moved quickly across the controls as she examined the biological scans of the human delegation that had arrived earlier that day. Ambassador, she finally said, and there was something strange in her voice that made Velkith turn away from the window. I have found something unusual in the human scans. What kind of unusual? Velkith asked without much interest. New species always had some biological quirk that seemed important at first, but turned out to be meaningless. Thessens enlarged a section of the display that showed a detailed map of the human nervous system. It looked like a tree made of lightning, with branches spreading from the brain down through the spine and into every part of the body. I cannot find their terminus reflex. Velkith blinked all 6 of his eyes in confusion. Surely he had misheard her. Run the scan again. I have run it 17 times, Ambassador. The result is always the same, Thiessen said, and now he could hear fear creeping into her voice. There is no cascade shutdown sequence. Their combat responses have no ceiling. They have no kill switch. The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire. Every sapient species in the Galactic Concord possessed a kill switch. It was considered a universal constant of evolved intelligence, as basic and necessary as having a brain or a heart. When pain became too great, when fear reached critical levels, when the body suffered too much damage, the kill switch activated and forced the creature into submission or unconsciousness. It was a survival mechanism that had allowed intelligent life to flourish across the galaxy. Without it, species would fight to mutual extinction over every disagreement. Wars would never end because no one would ever surrender. Civilization itself would be impossible. That cannot be correct. Velkith said firmly, every sapient species has a kill switch. It is how intelligence survives long enough to build societies. Without it, they would have destroyed themselves long before they reached the stars. And yet the humans are here. Thiessen replied, quiet life, looked back at the blue planet and felt something cold settle in his chest. For the first time in his long career, he did not know what to think. The diplomatic summit began 3 days later in the station's Grand Hall. Representatives from 12 Concord species gathered to welcome humanity into the galactic community. It was meant to be a celebration, A joyful moment when a new voice joined the great conversation of civilizations. Vec watched the human delegation enter the hall and tried to see them with new eyes. Their leader was a woman named Admiral Chun, who walked with the confidence of someone who had faced death many times and won. Behind her came scientists and diplomats and soldiers, all of them carrying themselves with that same quiet strength. They do not know they are broken. Velkith thought to himself. They do not understand what they are missing. Ceremonies proceeded as planned. Speeches were given, gifts were exchanged, and treaties were signed with great formality. The humans smiled and laughed and seemed genuinely happy to join the Concord, completely unaware of the secret discussions happening in private channels between worried ambassadors. What do we do with them? The Vrethkai representative asked during one such discussion. His species were apex predators, 8 feet tall and covered in natural armor, and they had conquered a dozen worlds before joining the Concord. If anyone understood the implications of a species without limits, it was them. We watch them, Velkith replied. We study them. We learn what they are capable of. And we hope that they are as peaceful as they seem. But hope was a fragile thing, and it shattered 2 months later when news arrived from the frontier a human colony world called Arden 4 had come under attack. A rogue faction of Vrethkai raiders, operating outside Concord law, had landed 3,000 shock troops on the planet and demanded immediate surrender. It was a standard intimidation tactic that had worked countless times before. The human garrison numbered only 200. They will surrender. Within the hour, the Vrethkai ambassador assured the emergency council, "My people are fearsome warriors. The humans will feel their kill switches activate the moment they see our troops advance. It is biology. It cannot be fought." Velkith said nothing, but he remembered Disan's words and felt that cold sensation return to his chest. Council voted to send observers to document the expected surrender and ensure the raiders face justice afterward. Velkith volunteered to go himself, driven by a need to understand what would happen when a species without limits faced impossible odds. He arrived at Arden 4 expecting to witness a quick and bloodless defeat. What he witnessed instead would haunt him for the rest of his very long life. The humans did not surrender. They did not run. They did not fall unconscious when fear and pain reached levels that would have shut down any other species in the galaxy. Instead, they fought. Velkith watched from his observation shuttle as 200 humans held their positions against 3,000 Vrethkai warriors. He watched them take wounds that should have triggered immediate shutdown and keep firing their weapons. He watched them drag injured comrades to safety while bleeding from a dozen cuts. He watched them refuse to accept what every law of biology said was inevitable. The battle lasted not 1 hour but 1 week, and when it was over, the humans were still standing. The Vrethkai raiders fled into the darkness of space, broken and terrified, their own kill switches activated not by wounds, but by something far worse. The psychological horror of facing an enemy that simply would not stop. Vec returned to the Concord with footage that would change galactic history. As his ship jumped through hyperspace, he composed a single message to the council. "We have made a terrible mistake," he wrote. "We thought we were welcoming a minor species into our alliance. We were wrong. The humans are not minor. They are not even normal. They are something the galaxy has never seen before." He paused and added one final line. "They are something we should all fear, and perhaps something we should all hope to become."